So I'm pleased to be able to introduce our guest, the presenter, Jason Lochhead, and I've got a long list of accolades to run off for all of you. Pro player on the FIVB World Beach Tour, started out his career coaching with Vanuatu Women's Program. Jason has coached a German men's pair, a Canadian men's pair to the Rio Olympics, with a men's pair under the Team USA banner at the Tokyo Olympics. Jason was also the assistant coach with Florida State and is now the high performance beach coach with Volleyball New Zealand. His most recent success with Shauna and Alice, ranked 44th in the world to claim gold against the world number 3 at the Asian Beach Champs in Thailand. Recently got back from Australia as part of an Elite 16 competition. I'm going to do my Aussie rules handball across to you, Jason. I will stop sharing my screen and it'll be all yours, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, really good to be here. Obviously, always kind of tough on Zoom. I feel like I always like to do this stuff more in person so you can have those kind of face-to-face and really talk things through, but I'll do the best I can. Yeah, thanks for the intro. I've been pretty lucky, with my career, I guess, playing-wise. I've been coached in New Zealand. I've actually been coached from some coaches in Germany and Brazil and USA, so kind of had that full range. I think everyone kind of normally talks about it where, yeah, Germany is obviously a very technical side of coaching. Brazil is very much that, a lot of reps, a lot of touches, and USA is more just getting out and playing. So kind of had that whole package of my history, I guess, and experience. And yeah, I don't know, I just try to do the best I can and pick out what I think works and then develop that into my players. But yeah, I'll share my screen. And Sean, you want to give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Yeah, sweet. So we're going to start with passing. So obviously passing, pretty one of the main fundamentals of the sport. And even though it is quite a basic skill, it's obviously still super important. And with every team I've worked with in high performance, it's always been something that we really focus on at the start of our training block. So we always even break it down to the smaller skill. And then obviously building up from that. And even with, when I was coaching Phil Dalhouser and Nick Lucina, even with those guys, I'd be doing it. So obviously a really important skill, a really fundamental one that we need to all kind of work at from the high performance all the way down. I'd say obviously with indoor, you're allowed to pass the ball that first contact with your hand. So I won't really talk too much about that because that's not my expertise, but I'll talk more about the other technique. So pretty much with passing, the biggest things that I kind of teach is, so the first thing, if I get this to play, first thing that I really talk about is, so the ball's coming to Alice over here, obviously being in an athletic position, keeping your hands apart is really key. And I know we always tell people, keep your hands apart, but sometimes we never say when to start bringing your hands together. So I normally say once the ball's getting to the net, that's when you can start bringing your hands together. And that's when you're starting to move into that position to line up for the pass. So yeah, big key is being in that position, waiting for the ball to come across in there. And that's when you can actually freely move into a position to pass the ball. You can see Alice is setting up for that pass to the side of her body. So that's another really big thing that I teach, is to keep that ball off the middle of your body. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, just because it kind of jams you up. So really working hard on keeping the ball to the side of the body. And you can see Alice does a really good job of that. And then coming in and she's getting her hands together, and you can see her body setting up to get into that passing position. A really big thing that sometimes we miss, I feel like, is you can see she's in the ready position there. She knows the ball's going to the side and she's making a little, might have missed that, sorry, try and get timing. She makes like a little hop step, not high, but just a little step to the side. And then she's getting into another great position where from there she can make a move. So sometimes we get stuck where the ball's going to our side and we just start going into a lunge position, which means what happens, like a lot on the beach with the wind and the ball that moves, and also with indoor it can float. And if we get into that position too early and then it moves away from us, we kind of get stuck. So you can see she's made that move to get into a good position, and then she can kind of lunge through that ball. And then from there, so the big things obviously with passing is creating those angles. And so the way we're creating that angles is, the main thing is with our platform and our shoulders. That's the key thing, that you're going to create the angles with that. And then it's with our body. So you can see she's creating a little bit of a C shape on the side, on her right side of her body. And then having her momentum go out towards her left. And that helps create you, I talk about it kind of getting around that ball. And then from there, all you're doing is moving your momentum through this way, out through the ball, and then the pass is going to come back here. She probably let go of her hands a little early there, but otherwise pretty good. So to me, those are the really big keys with passing, is that keeping the hands apart, getting into a good position to the side of your body, then you're creating that angle and moving through the ball in that same direction. So those are the main aspects, I think, of the passing. From there, when you're in that position, you can really create whatever angle you want. So obviously in beach, we want more of that up and down, getting to that middle of the court. And indoor, you can have your hands that lower to create that more bullet pass coming into that 2.5. So those are really the key things with passing. These are probably some of the things where I see the mistakes. And so if you have that picture in your mind of what that good technique is, and then these are some of the areas where I'll talk about where I see some people getting into some trouble. So similar coming down here on the left side player, he's actually doing a really good job, hands apart, getting into a good position. Everything's looking really good. And then at the last moment, you can see him swing his hands back. Oh, I went too far back. So if you watch that, he's there, and then see where his hands finish up. So he's swinging back. So that's a really common thing that I see with players, and it's a natural thing because we want the ball to go that way. So we swing our arms towards that point. But what actually happens is we're actually changing our angles. So by holding our platform out there and moving through in that same direction, we're going to keep that angle of our platform longer, which means we're going to be more consistent. And as soon as we start swiping like that, then we start changing a lot of the angles, which ends up into kind of a pass like that, quite far off the net. So that's one really big thing that I see when you're teaching that passing technique that you got to watch out for. This is another one kind of similar here. So she has a sweeping technique here as well, but you'll notice when the ball's coming to her, so this is the other thing that I'll see quite a lot. So the ball's coming to her, she's already getting her hands together early in the middle. So doing that means that you're going to get your hands together there early, and then you're going to have to swing your platform out to that ball like that. And same thing it's changing those angles all the way through. So a big thing is, like, obviously we can still pass good doing that, but the consistency is not going to be there. And obviously at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing we want to be doing well, is being consistent passer as many times as we can to that good spot. So really watching for the swiping. And then here, so I talked about it before, I really try to teach to stay off that midline. Probably another person I've seen talk a lot about it is Kats Karai, who coaches the USA women's team at the moment for indoor. He talks a lot about keeping it off that midline. Obviously, for indoor, if you're passing with your hands, you want to be on that midline because that's where you're going to be strong. But if you're taking it down off the platform, we really want to stay off that, because what happens is when you're there, if the ball moves up or down on you, your angle is going to have to change. So if it comes up on you, your arms are naturally going to have to come up. You're going to get jammed and the ball is going to get passed up off the net. Or if it drops on you, then the angle goes down and suddenly you're going to create a really fast bullet pass. Sorry, this thing just popped up in front of me. The pole. Yeah, so that really big reason for me is on that. Also, if the ball slightly moves either side, you just naturally go with it, and that's the way you pass the ball. The other big reasons that I'd go with it too is we want to try and make everything as easy as possible. We don't want to make it harder than what it should be. So if I've got all this area here to cover, and a serve's coming, say way down here where she's going down my middle, I don't really want to have to be moving my body all the way over to here every time, or down my line all the way over here and doing all that extra work. So you can see she's making this big jump over, all this extra work to get her body into that position. And then you can see in this one here, it's quarter high and she's kind of stuck. So the big thing with keeping it to the side of your body is if it comes high on you, all you do is rotate your body, and you're actually going to keep that angle and be able to move with it. And then kind of same if it drops on you as well. So that's a really big thing. So those are kind of things that I see people struggle with. Froze on me. And then, yeah, so I guess I'll talk about coaching it. So for me, with anything I kind of coach, really important for me to make sure the player is committed to it. So I'll kind of explain to the player like why I think this is important, doing this technique. I think it's really important in the beginning, not just telling them what to do. Because I think I've always kind of found that if as a player, if I really trust what I'm doing, then I'm going to be able to do it really good. If I'm just getting told what to do, but I don't fully understand it or fully believe it, then I'm never really going to do it as good. So it's really about trying to get your players to understand why it's so important, is this biggest thing. And then for them to understand the feeling of it, because if you just tell them, no, that's not it, or that is it, but they're not really understanding when that moment is or how they felt in that moment, I think is really important with coaching. So having that communication with my players, explaining it through, seeing how they feel about it, and then having that talk through. Sometimes I think when you get into some of the more technical side of the sport, sometimes they can feel something else is better for them. And then that's where you go down the road of testing things out. Obviously with this passing, if they really felt like it wasn't it, I'd still let them test it out. But normally it always comes back to we end up passing this way. So I think that's a really big thing, to let them do that as well, and not just force them into being like, this is the only way. And then you kind of make that connection with them, with that feeling. So when you're going through the motions, like seeing when they make a pass, whether they're swiping at the ball, ask them what they felt like happened in that moment, and see if it's the same as what actually happened, is really big. And then if you can use video with that, is obviously way even more helpful. Because sometimes I've felt in coaching, most people do trust you when you tell them what you're saying, but sometimes people are a little stubborn and they're like, nah, surely not. So it can help with that video for them to actually see it themselves, and then it kind of clicks and get a little bit quicker. But yeah, if you ask them questions about it, how did that one feel? What do you think happened? I think is really important when you're going through those coaching moments. And it can be a little bit harder at the front end, I think, for sometimes working with some people when they're trying to get it. But once they kind of get that understanding, that feeling, then it almost makes the coaching easier and a lot less work for you. Like even today, coaching one of my players, and they swiped at the ball, and I kind of looked at them and they looked at me and they're like, yeah, I swiped at that one. I was like, yeah. And so like, those moments where they're already clicking on it and then they start coaching themselves almost, that's where you want to be trying to get to. So I think that's really important in anything you're doing, any aspect of the sport that you're doing with coaching, is to try and head down that path and try and get those connections firing in the athletes so they get the feeling and the understanding of it. So normally, okay, back to the passing technique, kind of got off there a little bit. The way I normally break it down is I would have either a player or a coach set up in front of the person. So I would be on the same side. So say Shauna here, right side player is passing, I'd be on the same side as the net as her, just standing at the net there and about that distance away. And I'll just be throwing a ball from my chest pretty flat. So you don't want too much of a loop on it. So pretty flat just to the side of her body. So getting out to here to the spot. And then I'll be having her already have her right hand out there, so a little bit wider than what she would naturally have. So it's already pre-setting up. And then all she has to do is bring her left hand to that point. From there, she's pretty much creating that angle, and just throwing it in there, and she's making that pass. Really important thing when you're doing that is to tell them, don't worry about the result of the pass, because what's going to happen is the ball is actually not going to create this perfect shape to where we want it to do. It's probably going to go on the right angle, but it's probably going to be pretty flat and yeah, not that pretty, I guess. Because the thing is, when you're doing that chest pass, it's hard for them to generate enough energy. So it's really important for them to take that away from it, which can be really hard for people. So to make sure you're clear that, hey, forget what happened to the ball. All I'm focused on are we getting those angles right. So you've got to really take it down to that small step there. So you're getting them there, they're really finishing through on that moment, almost holding that finish is really important. And then they can almost look at their hands, their platform, their shoulders, where they're in a good position. And then you're kind of just repeating that through. Then I'd bring it back and I'd go on this side of the net and just do standing drives. Same thing to the side, have that hand out there coming through. And this is where you can get a little bit more motion through the ball. So the player can get a little bit more through and you might get a bit more shape. And then from there, you just be building it up. Yeah, probably, I guess some other things is like, so I have some of my wordage that I use where I guess I use that wait until the ball crosses the top of the net before you start bringing your hands together is one I always like to use for that kind of imagery stuff. Getting around the ball, you know, creating that shape with the shoulders and the platform to get around it. But a big thing too is to understand what the player kind of responds to. So I've had some players where, you know, they were struggling with that, but in their head, one player thought, okay, what makes sense to me is when I have my hands apart, it's creating a big triangle, which is the point of the triangle is at your chest, your hands are at the widest part. And then as the ball gets closer, I'm flipping the triangle around. And then the point is at my hands, and then the highest part is the top. So that made sense to them to keep their hands apart and, you know, kind of those two shapes. Another one that I always find is hard case is, Phil Dalhouser. He obviously loved video games. So to him, it was kind of like like in a shooter game where when the target's really far away, your aimer is really wide. And then as the target gets closer, it gets closer together until you make contact. So as the ball was coming closer, his hands were coming closer together, and then it was kind of like he was shooting the ball to make that point. So yeah, I think that, and that kind of goes with that coaching connection, I guess. You know, what resonates with them to get it firing in their brain on what's happening as quickly as possible is really important. And then once they get it, they just fly with it, you know, instead of you just being like, no, this, and then it's just not getting through. Like some players, yeah, we all learn different and see different. So I think that's like a massive thing. Yeah, I think that's enough for me on the passing one.
So Jace, firstly, I love what you shared. As someone who doesn't know much about volleyball, I learned a hell of a lot. I'm really keen, and we talked about this the other day a little bit around the difference between an internal coaching cue and an external coaching cue. And I want to bring in this piece around using analogies when we coach as well. So if I just, for the benefit of people watching the recording and for the benefit of those who have stayed behind, an internal cue is where you focus, a coach will give a snippet of information that encourages the player to focus on their body. An example of that is, you know, focus on your hands, focus on your arms. It's encouraging you to think about your body. And an external focus attention is a cue that you would give that focuses on the effect of the movement. So you might talk about the ball, you might talk about the court or the sand, whatever it may be. And there's a ton of research out there that talks about an internal cue where you focus on your body can make you quite rigid in your movement. And because you're focusing on your body, and so you're over-focused really. And an external cue allows the body to take care of itself, and you're more free in your movement. So Jace, I'm just keen, do you use external cues or internal cues
Yeah.
when you're coaching?
That's all right. I was just cheating to see if you're still.
Yeah, it's still great.
Hey, Dad.
Oh yeah, it cut out for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and when we were talking about it today, it was actually the first time I heard it as internal and external. I always kind of talk about it as like brain A and brain B. Yeah, and brain A, yeah, that internal where you're almost thinking about things with your body. So your brain is thinking about moving the arm into that position and moving your feet and getting in there. And I always find like when you're going through those learning stages, that's really important because you want to get that technique really down and know that you're moving into the right positions. But it can be really frustrating for players because they don't feel like they're doing it good because it takes a while for the brain to click to those positions. So everything's a little bit slower, not as smooth. And then that external is kind of thinking about, okay, just putting the ball into that spot, or okay, I'm going to go attack it. So you're not thinking so much of the body and you're just letting it happen. And that's where everything is so much smoother. And it's just, you just don't think about it. It's just like breathing. You do my approach in a volleyball. I don't think about my approach at all now. But when I was back at section schools or high school, I was like to think about it, left, right, left, close, all the stuff. And then you're like, don't feel that good on it. It's all those things. So building to that point where going through the technical stuff, you have to do that. You can't just jump straight to the only external. So it is those, I feel like those steps. But yeah, that's ultimately where you want to be on game day, is just focus on what's happening around you, the game.
Freedom.
Yeah, that freedom. So everything's free and smooth.
And not overthinking. When you overthink, you then worry, and that impacts on a whole raft of things. That's fair. Again, I got one more query before I fire messages to the breakout rooms and try and pull them back. And I want to talk about the difference between like blocked practice, where you would focus on one skill, passing, and interleaving, where you would focus on multiple skills. You would still have a focus on the passing, but you might layer it with other skills, serve, receive, a serve, a set, whatever it may be. And I just want to get your take on blocked practice, where you focus on one skill, or interleaving, where you might layer in some other skills at the same time. And your thoughts?
I guess the block training is I'd use very I normally talk about my block. So say, early in the year, building into comm games, we had a 16-week block that we were building in for it. So those first 2.5 weeks were very much that, where it was like, okay, we're working on one skill today, we're really breaking it down and going through, and then from there you'd lead into that the other one you're talking about, where you might have a bit more layered stuff, and from that stage I feel like you always start with still working on what you just did, very detailed at the beginning of training, and then flowing it a bit more and a bit more freedom as you go in. So you're always trying to bring those skills into the match and slowly build it in so it feels natural for the players, so they're not jumping straight from super technical to okay, just do it in the game now. So you're trying to slowly make it more game-like as you're building closer to the tournament. And then obviously when you're getting close to a tournament, you just want to be doing a lot of matches.
Getting into that rhythm.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And then if you were thinking about, teaching the skill of passing, you were a beginner coach, or you were, in that developing bracket, or you were an elite coach, what, with regards to blocked practice and layering in, would there be considerations for the kind of age and stage of who you're coaching as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the younger ages, you're probably just going to be working a little bit longer on those very basic skills with the passing and working on that. That the hard thing is too is I always Mike Dudson was the one who said it, those basic skills are like white rice. Like if it's by itself, it's pretty boring, not that tasteful. You got to put the nice stuff on top. So it is that, and it's the same with the top players. You have those stages where you do need to work on that white rice, but you don't want to do it so much that they get bored and they're like, sick of it. So I think it's reading your players is the biggest thing. Is, when are they ready to move on? Do they need more of it? Or when do you need to have a bit of fun and make it entertaining, and then go back to those basics to make sure, because they've still got to work on it. Because again, we're playing a sport that we all love, and we want to have fun at it. We don't want it to be draining and
like I play volleyball. I don't repetitively practice one skill volleyball.
Yeah.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Just wondering if you do any like specific training for jump servings and floating servings, like what kind of difference you do when you're coaching to pass a float serve or a jump serve?
Oh, passing it. I think probably, yeah. The biggest thing that I talk about on the difference with that is, with the jump serve, you're going to always want to create that space from the arm to the body, creating that away. And with that jump serve, that gives you that room to be able to take a little bit off it, because normally that speed on that ball, you can't really just move through the ball, because then it's going to just rocket too high. So that's the biggest thing we talk about with the jump serve, is being able to still create that angle, but pulling your arms away. So you're still creating that same angle, but you might have to pull your arms away to take something off it. That's the biggest thing with that. And then with the float serve, especially, with beach, they changed the ball in 2009, which I hated, and it moves a lot more. So we always talk about picking that spot and then you attack the ball instead of letting that ball come to you and attack you. Because I feel like a lot of times you're setting up, you think it's going to be in this nice spot and you're going to move through it, and then suddenly it just pops up or pops down on you really last minute, and can make it quite hard. So like trying to pick that spot out in front of you, and then you're going to attack through that ball, because a lot of times you have to give that float serve that little bit more momentum. So that's probably the two big differences that we talk about for those.